All right, Catch, as you start to empty your brain, I'm sure at some point I'll be throw a few at you, but where do we start here? Is there a logical place for you to start?
You know what? I think the most interesting guy. Let's talk about Ryan Wingo, the 5-star wide receiver from Missouri.
Okay.
Anybody look, here's the deal. You guys know the drill. Super chat questions go to the front of the pack.
Super.
But you can also comment, leave your questions in the chat. Who knows when we will dip in and out of the chat to take a question. The super chat questions go to the front of the top.
Especially them $20 ones.
But we'll start with Ryan Wingo because I think he may have this single most interesting recruitment in a lot of ways of maybe any player that I've ever covered at the University of Texas in recruiting.
Okay.
Texas and Missouri have emerged as the top two schools for Ryan Wingo, which I've always said for like the last 6 months. If you're Texas and you're recruiting Wingo, what you want to hear is that when decision time comes, you are one of the schools against Missouri, because it's always going to be Missouri versus the other school. What it was never going to be, I think, is two out-of-state schools.
Right, because he's a St. Louis kid.
There's so much pressure. And, it's like this in it's almost every state, right? I mean, it's in a school like Missouri where there really is one in-state program for football that matters. It's, a little different in basketball, I suppose. But, Kansas, it feels like St. Louis is a Missouri city, and Kansas City is a split between KU and Missouri, but it's the state itself. It's a Missouri school. And so there's pressure for him to end up at Missouri. Texas has emerged as the school opposite Missouri in this recruitment. What's interesting about this recruitment is that NIL will play a major factor. And one of the edges that Missouri has going for it is that the Missouri legislation passed a law that allows high school prospects like Ryan Wingo to start earning NIL in September before they've graduated from high school. But
he can start this September is what you're saying.
But I believe it's like if it's Missouri. Like I don't know that I'd have to look up the exact law because it's so new and it's so isolated to Missouri. I haven't completely grasped how it works, but there's this sense that he might commit to Missouri, even if he doesn't plan on going to Missouri, because he wants to take advantage of being able to make NIL money starting in September. Now, that I think makes his recruitment. I've never seen that before. We're literally watching a kid who there's a sense that come September 1st, Missouri NIL could start kicking in right away. And that, it seems like if it goes to Texas, and it's one of the things I don't completely understand the law. Like, why couldn't Texas NIL at that point kick in if he wanted to? But there's a sense that that's the thing. If you're Texas, you've got to avoid. That being said, my best source, by the way, Brian Turner, thank you very much. Feel free to get a question in. We don't want to take your $5 and give you a shout out.
If you meant to, get it in there. We'll be looking for it. If not, thank you so much for the
exactly. $5. We appreciate that. Show everybody the way.
Mm-hmm.
My best source on this says, look, we could be getting conned. Sure, that could happen because Missouri literally has a state law that's been devised to try to help Missouri in recruiting. Jason Sukumel made the comment, I couldn't tell if he was half serious or if he was telling the truth, that Missouri coaches showed up in the state legislature that night in the building, in the Capitol, to support. This helps us out.
So this is the opposite of the whole Quinn Ewers thing, right? Quinn gets out of Texas because Texas didn't have the law. Missouri kids are thinking about staying with the Tigers because of this law.
And when you do see an occasional coach get upset about not every state law, because right now the players operate based on the state laws that exist in the state. In California, think about a kid like Brandon Baker, the offensive lineman from Mater Dei, who's the number 28 prospect in the latest Rivals rankings. I think I can't remember which service has him ranked as a 5-star and a few spots higher, but if in the end of the year he's 28th in the state, he will be, or in the country, he'll be a 5-star. In California, agents or lawyers or representatives or whomever, they can begin NIL conversations immediately. Whereas in the state of Texas, technically, you're never supposed to talk NIL with a kid. That you can't talk specifics in NIL in the state of Texas before they sign. Otherwise, you risk your eligibility with the UIL, and it is against state law apparently at this time. But in California, you've got a situation where Brandon Baker is already talking to all of the schools that are recruiting him, Nebraska included. You remember last year, the transfer defensive end, the big talking point was that Nebraska had offered him a bunch of NIL money, and that's why he didn't come to Texas. Ultimately, that proved to not be true. In this case, he's letting everybody know, I'm about NIL. It matters to me. I have people. Let me know what's what. So you've got California doing that. You've got Missouri doing what they're doing. You've got Texas doing what you're doing. And it makes every conversation with every kid that we'll talk about is completely different because of all these weird little unique NIL rules that exist. And it's literally the 2 out-of-state 5-stars that Texas are recruiting have wildly different NIL parameters involved in their recruitment. And I think as we watch, look, Texas feels really good about Ryan Wingo. Do you know what will let us know that Texas is in fantastic shape with Ryan Wingo? If we get to like September 5th and that kid's still uncommitted, that's as sure of a sign as you can possibly get, because there is pressure. There's even some thoughts like, what's the harm in committing to Missouri for a few months, making some immediate cash? Don't
this
do
right
it
here
long term.
Yeah, Paul Super Chat, $4.99.
Yeah, high school prospects in Missouri should do non-binding, get paid, then sign with who they want in December and get paid again. It's all on the table. So these are the things that we're watching for in that recruitment. All I can tell you is that I've confronted sourcing behind the scenes, and I've said, Missouri people are confident. They think they're going to throw a ton of NIL money at him. In fact, I've heard like $700,000
Dang.
that he could get from Missouri if he signs with Missouri. That is such a random number.
It almost has to be real.
Yeah. Because remember,
700,000, right? Why not just say $500,000?
You would remember when Jordan Addison, when USC was going to get Jordan Addison, and Cowherd was like, there's an offer of he's going to make $2 million. And it's like, right. That's so specific and almost round. I don't believe that. It turned out to not be true. I've heard that the word on the street, the grapevine talk, this out here in these recruiting streets, 700 large. Well, back in the day, Andre 3000 was Andre 3 stacks.
Yes.
He could be Ryan 700 stacks if he wants to. It gives you an idea, though, of the type of money that's being discussed in recruiting. And this $700,000 number, this came from a Missouri source. $700,000. That's what they're talking about in the state of Missouri with regards to this recruitment. It gives you the value. It gives you an idea of what is available for kids with that kind of recruiting profile.
And they've also got to be talking about it, Catch, I would imagine, in the fan circles. Maybe it's the insiders are hearing from fan circles, from big money donor circles. If you're a Missouri, I mean, think about it. You're Missouri. You've been in the Big 12, exactly the same. Big 12, been in the SEC, out of the Big 12 for the same amount of time A&M has. Couple good runs, but ultimately you're not thought of super highly. There's got to be a little braggadociousness in those talks, right? If I'm a big money donor at Missouri, I'm thinking, hey, we're going to keep him. How you going to do it? And overheard at a diner is $700,000. $700,000, really? Have you heard 700,000? That's how I'm
the
guessing
sewing circles in Missouri.
Exactly. That's
been spread
travel.
fast.
That's going to travel differently because Missouri people, and they'd be right, by the way. I think the normal Missouri donor would think, well, I don't think every school, even the big dog schools, are throwing $700,000 at every kid or every 5-star.
And
You're
look,
probably
Missouri,
right about that. Missouri, you're probably right.
Yeah, and Chad, Missouri doesn't have to put $700,000 on the table for every kid in their recruiting class. They've only got to do it for the 5-star guy that, quite frankly, their state's not producing every year. And there's some talk that Missouri has got a chance to maybe land 2, 3, 5 stars this year, which would make for a historically good class for them. That it won't happen every year. They might sign 25 guys, and some of the 25 guys might not have any NIL deals. It reminds me a little bit of the conversation with Micah Hudson at Texas Tech. That doesn't seem to be a recruitment that's being based off of NIL. But the thing that we've continued to hear is that when it's time, and I point back to the Quinn Ewers transfer, when he transferred from Ohio State, that turned into a Texas Tech versus Texas battle. And one of the things that Texas Tech was able to do very quickly in the re-recruitment of Quinn Ewers is Tech was able to let him know, you want to make $1 million, we can get you $1 million. Tech, I think, isolated in specific situations, can compete from an NIL standpoint like Missouri can, right? In isolated instances, they can hang. I think where it becomes more difficult, and I think one of the things that Texas has really specialized in part, they've recruited so well. They keep landing super blue chip prospects in volume. You know, these things don't happen by accident. So it's kind of the state of where we are, but it's been a huge weapon for Texas, that Texas is organized well enough that recruitment by recruitment, it's been a net plus by a large margin, more so than I think it's been for a lot of schools who are like, we can't keep up with that. And I mentioned this to you last week. I think from an NIL perspective, Georgia, Texas, and Texas A&M, I think are generally viewed as the superpowers in NIL right now. You've got Georgia, who has a fan base that keeps winning, and they want more of it.
Yep.
So we've seen this with LSU baseball and LSU women's basketball. You win a championship, and the fans of those sports give. If Texas were to ever win if Texas ever wins a national basketball, national championship in women's basketball under Vic, the NIL following that will suddenly allow the program to jump up, right? You've got Georgia, who's got a motivated fan base because they keep winning. You got an A&M fan base who's motivated because they want to start winning big. They haven't done it in a long time. They really want to do it in a big, bad way. So you've got that fan base, however it's constructed, motivated. And Texas, I think all three schools that are, I would call the superpowers, I think those schools in different ways have been able to reach the money that they've been able to reach to support recruiting the way that they've been able to support it. And it's not an accident All three of these schools finished in the top 3 last year, or have finished. A&M 2 years ago, the number 1 overall class. Georgia constantly 1 or 2 every single year. And then Texas last year finishes 3rd in the rivals rankings. I can't remember what they did everywhere else, but like those things don't happen by accident. And then after that, if you're wondering, the Ohio States, the Alabamas, the Clemsons, the hundreds of thousands just decline. It's happening in hundreds of thousands, but it might be 200,000. It might be NIL works for a lot of these other powers. They haven't been able to get the money in that allows them to do, that allows a Colin Simmons recruitment to end and have Colin Simmons say, hey, ultimately, I did what I thought was the best thing I could do for the betterment of my family. There's a lot of ways to read that. He could have meant nothing related to NIL. He also could have acknowledged the elephant in the room, which is one of the real incredible byproducts right now of being a Ryan Wingo, of being a Brandon Baker, of being a Micah Hudson. Should Micah Hudson circle back around on Texas? You're going to win on the NIL level more so than any other school. And on top of that, Texas has developed a reputation for coming through on what they say, what has been projected will happen. There has not been one guy that I'm aware of who's essentially like Jordan Addison, who showed up at USC and went, where's my $2 million? And they were like, hey man, sign some autographs. We can get you a couple $100,000. Wait, what? How do I get the $2 million that Cowherd was talking about? Those things have not been happening. I've never heard a Georgia prospect talked about that way. And I've certainly never heard a Texas prospect that is signed. Instead, they all seem to be getting Lamborghini deals. Shout out to our guys over at Covert Hutto, though, because I feel like I've seen Xavier Worthy at Covert Hutto. I think DeMarvion Overshown might have been at Covert Hutto last year. Like, these dudes get incredibly well taken care of on the NIL front, and it is an impossible conversation to have in recruiting anymore. You can't do it without talking about it.
And Catch, it'll be interesting to watch. Like you said, it's a different NIL discussion. I wonder if for Ryan Wingo, does it really matter to him that he could get some of that money up front? Like some of the upfront money based on the Missouri law. Isn't Texas's argument to him, dude, breathe. You'll get the money eventually, and trust us. When we hit the button and Missouri hits the button, you're not going to even hear their button.
It's interesting. I'll bring Texas A&M into the discussion. I am not. This is a disclaimer. Okay, total disclaimer. Tim, I see your question. We'll get to it in just a second. I am not alleging that Texas A&M is cheating in football. That is not what is happening. What I am going to tell you is the reputation that exists on the recruiting streets. It could be completely wrong. I'm just telling you that this is the reputation that exists behind the scenes, is that if Texas and Texas A&M are recruiting against each other, what Texas fans will allege, again, I got no proof. Not trying to get sued, I don't want Billy getting mad at me. I'm not personally saying that this is what is happening, but I am acknowledging an elephant in the room, right? It exists out there. There's a feeling that if A&M is recruiting you, you can get your NIL dollars earlier than Texas, who pretty much demands that you have to be on campus. You get on campus, the NIL is going to work. But there's no old school $500,000 in a brown paper bag or a suitcase or anything like that. A&M gets alleged to like crypto payments and stuff. It's recruiting stuff, right? It's a little bit like that $710,000 number. Who knows where that even started? It just gets said out loud. But to your point, one of the conversations that I think takes place with Texas is that they do at times have to have conversations with recruits where And Ryan Wingo now is in a state where legally this can take place, where he can start getting paid in September. That's a new thing that's different about his recruitment, that's different than everybody else's. And yeah, if you're Texas, you've got to tell Ryan Wingo, hey man, look at our 5 stars. Look at what they're driving. Let them tell you how much money they're making. Full transparency, right?
Sure.
But you have to wait until you get on campus. And when that happens, it can happen. And there are some recruits, there are some parents who are like, yo, man, I hear what you're saying, but a bird in the hand's worth 2 in the bush.
Yeah. And that's fair too. Because again, taking care of the family can be different for different people at different times. By the way, just side comment, Catch. I do think one of my favorite new NIL flexes is Texas being able to say, our center drives a Lambo. See you.
Doesn't hurt.
Right? Like, that's pretty cool when it's because you just think of it as it's a quarterback, running back, or wide receiver. That's pretty damn cool. That's a pretty damn cool thing to say.
And I'm just talking out loud right now. By the way, real quick, Tim Lee, a really good super chat. Thanks for the $9.99 and little insider trading here.
Yeah.
Don't worry, guys. Ran into Ronnie Wingo, Ryan's older brother, at the club. Of course. Threw the horns up. We're good, LOL. Also, St. Louis and Casey has had an impressive high 4-star and 5-star run as of late. Absolutely. No doubt about it, Tim.
So flashing of the horns at the club, that's it? Locked in? Don't worry about it?
Sounds like it.
That's how it works? Okay.
That's code.
That's the brother. That's not him, though.
Yes. It's Ronnie Wingo.
Okay. Just check.
So you know. I love that Tim is in Missouri representing Texas in the recruitment with the older brother. He's not crossing boundaries. He's recognizing, oh crap, that's Ronnie Wingo. He's the older brother of a key recruit. Jimmy just boom, pop that up there. He gets a head nod. It's on.
By the way, am I the only person that just heard the name Ronnie Wingo and thought of Tombstone? I know it's not that name, but it's close. But am I the only one?
Yes.
Right, just saying. It's close.
By the way, real quick, when you were doing the O'Malley story from earlier, I can't remember. It was UFC.
The UFC. Sugar Sean. Yes. Sugar Sean O'Malley.
If I go, O'Malley, do you remember that reference?
Oh, I don't. No, I don't. O'Malley. I don't know that.
Good Morning Vietnam.
Oh,
he's talking to the guys, and he's the one guy asking him a question. And he's like, he's nervous. He's like, O'Malley.
Yep, man, that's it. Yeah, that one got by me. I've seen Good Morning Vietnam maybe twice all the way through. I haven't seen it a ton to know
that is disappointing to hear. It really is.
I dig the movie. I dig the movie. I'm a huge Robin Williams guy. I just, for some reason, that one I haven't seen a ton of.
O'Malley.
It's a good movie though.
Let's see. What do we got here from we got Tim's super chat. All right, we're caught up. If you want to get your super chat questions in, you can. I wanted to know, did you have any Blake Ivy questions for me, Chad?
It's funny you brought up Blake Ivy because I was going to ask you. I saw that, I saw a little breakdown on Blake, and from the Orange Bloods crew and from reading stuff over at Aggie Yell, I definitely get the idea Blake Ivy's going to end up as an Aggie, but I want you to tell me for sure. Tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., he is going to announce his commitment. I'm seeing 6'3.5", 280. Blake Ivy, big offensive tackle. A&M, Texas, LSU are the 3 teams. But from what I'm reading, this is clearly an Aggie. This is an Aggie thing all the way. Would you agree?
Yeah. There had been some conversation that LSU, about a month ago, I had heard that LSU had surged in that recruitment and may have overtaken A&M. That I haven't seen any evidence that exists. I think A&M's really confident. They've been on top of this recruitment the entire way. Texas has tried to get involved with Blake. He's a guy that I think they would really be interested in. And I'm somewhat surprised by that because He's not the biggest guy in the world. What we know of Kyle Flood is he likes these big monsters.
Yeah, I did say 280 in case people missed that.
And 6'3.5" is short for an offensive lineman. Doesn't mean that you can't be a badass. I mean, Justin Blaylock was 6'3", right? We talked about him earlier. Height was never an issue.
4-star kid, right? 4-star.
Yes. I mean, he is a guy that when we talk about, I think Rivals has him ranked as a Rivals 250 guy. I think two others, sir, forgive me for not having the Blake Ivy recruitment completely memorized. I believe there are two other services that have him ranked between 100 and 150. And then there's one service, I think On3 has him ranked as a national top 100 guy. So he's not a super blue chip prospect, but he's in this next tier below that. And he's really good. I tend to think of him. Let me look up where I have him ranked. I think I've got him ranked near the top 25. He's a really good player. He is a little undersized, but that really is. Let me tell you what he has. He's got great feet. He's a really good athlete. And he's one of these guys that if he hits, I have him ranked 43rd in the state. Ironically, I have him ranked about where Rivals has him ranked. Why I have him ranked a little lower than a couple of these other services, historically, guys with his body type miss more than these gigantic, massive guys. I mean, guys that are 6'6", 6'7", and 3 bills just turn into NFL players more so at a higher rate than guys who have a 6'3", 6'3 and a half, 6'4-ish, 280 frame. He's got to develop that a little bit, but I think he's a fantastic prospect. This is a perfect case of I've got him ranked 43rd in the state. I don't have him ranked as a super blue chip, and yet I would stand on the table and say his upside is high enough that you take him in any given class. There's a reason why he's not quite a super blue chip, but I think the upside is there that if he hits his ceiling, he can be an absolute all-conference performer. And if A&M gets him tomorrow, that'll be a really good get.
Tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. on Blake Ivy. By the way, Catch, our producer Blake was with me thinking, O'Reilly Auto Parts when you started down that road.
I would get the clip from the movie, but then YouTube would flag us for
we don't want to do that. Yeah, Paul also said, I thought Catch was going with O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Now that you guys have said it, it does sound like that.
It does.
O'Reilly's
All right,
Parts.
But Catch, our favorite truck driver of the day, Buckwild Longhorn, $5 super chat out of nowhere. Do either of you two know how Keelan's Alabama National Championship ring ended up on Pawn Stars?
He probably sold it.
Yeah, I believe that was the story. He was injured on that run and really he didn't feel completely connected to that team and got rid of the ring and pawned the ring.
I had a player who I won't say his name out loud. I don't want to put his info out there. I would imagine 20 years later, it's an embarrassing story. But when Texas, when was it? They won a Big 12 South championship, probably 2001. And because they didn't win it in 2002 through 2004. So it had to have been after the 2001 season. They had a Big 12 South championship ring. I can remember a young player on that team called me up because he wanted me to post on Orange Bloods that he was selling his Big 12 South championship ring.
Dang.
You don't want to know why?
Because he needed money?
He needed to pay a cell phone bill.
Damn.
And I was like, young man, I can't do that. Like, trust me, I'll be getting an email from John Bianco if you are auctioning a bowl ring with your name on it.
Yeah, minimum email.
How do we know that was Keelan Robinson's bowl championship? Because it has his name on it.
Right. They put your name on those things.
If it wasn't sold, presumably he'd won it back. I doubt he just gave it away. Oh, it's on Pawn Stars. Probably a bad decision to give it to that guy who was standing outside of an airport and asked for it. I should have done that. Or who knows? Maybe it was like in Coming to America, and instead of giving like a wad of cash to the homeless guy, he's like handing
Gave
the
a
bowling,
ring,
which would be an awesome gesture. Like at that point,
sure.
I don't think that's what happened though. But
Right.
yeah, man, the best part about NIL is I can't tell you how many times back when I actually called recruits a lot. I don't do it as much anymore. I'm older. I let Sukamel kind of handle the recruiting calls. But I can't tell you how many times these recruits, because you build up a relationship with them. You know, you're texting with them, you're talking with them. They'll call up and say, "Hey, Catch, can I put my TV in your garage? Because I don't have any money and I just got thrown out of my apartment
Oh,
and I don't know where I'm going to live. So I just need a place to put my TV." That happens. So like I said, I've had guys call me up and be like, "I need to sell my championship ring because I have a cell phone bill. I owe $180 on my cell phone bill, but I got no money. I got to do what I got to do." The best thing about NIL is that these kids don't have to live like paupers anymore. That's been like the most frustrating thing for me, Chad, is to know guys personally who are really struck. DeMarvion Overshone is the poster boy for NIL. He almost didn't come back to Texas after COVID. He went back home. He got a job. He's helping his family make ends meet during a tough time. And, you know, like, say what you want to about DeMarvion, his family is so important to him.
mm-hmm.
And he almost didn't finish his Texas career because of the urgency of, I got to take care of my family. There was a year, I think it was in 2021, maybe it was 2020, the years blur together, where he was the last guy to show up, last guy to report.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And these are real life things. And before NIL, you got a guy like DeMarvion Overshone, who's an All-American, All-Conference. He's a starter. He's given you everything that he has. But back home, he's got a family that's struggling to pay bills, that could use a little bit of help. Sometimes these guys have families. Another perfect example. Last year, the kid the wide receiver that transferred from Alabama. He wasn't here long enough for me to. That's right. Ajay Hall. Thank you, Blake. You were right on top of that. I got a lot of names and crazy stuff in my head, but I will probably forget Ajay. I shouldn't. That should be an easy name to remember. Ajay Hall was obsessed with NIL. You know why? Because he had I think a girlfriend, but they had a baby together. Think about raising a child in Austin, Texas.
Oh, geez.
When you're 20 years old.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I want my girlfriend and my baby to be in Austin. So we got to get an apartment. Try getting a good apartment around campus in Austin, Texas, where you could have a family inside of it. I mean, that's expensive.
Yep.
And we're in an era now where these guys don't have to beg to survive. And it's not, and I know some people will be like, that's not the case for everybody. And you're right. You're right. There are occasional Johnny Manziels, although obviously his wealth was exaggerated. We thought he came from oil. It turned out he didn't. But there are families that are affluent, right? There are guys who have parents who are bankers and parents who own car dealerships or parents who played in the NFL. They got a little bit more money. You know, Terrence Brooks, his situation may be different. His dad, Chet, longtime NFL player. Like, you know what I mean? It's just, you would imagine his situation is different than some guys who don't maybe come from a situation where there are multiple parents, job situations are different. That doesn't have to happen anymore is why I am an avid NIL defender while acknowledging the problematic elements that do exist outside of that. And yes, Bobby, the best example is probably Arch Manning, who, hey, and here's the difference between like where some of these kids come from, Chad. Arch Manning could have $1 million NIL deals right now. And he and his family have chosen no NIL deals first year. Now, I think he did the Panini thing, but I don't think that meant that like Arch was getting $100,000 or anything like that. I don't know the specifics of that deal, mainly because they don't have to tell me.
Sure.
But
yeah.
In general, what I'd heard is Arch is staying out of the NIL space. They're not really worried about money. And yet we've got a situation with Ryan Wingo. I don't know anything about his parents at all. But what I know is there's a state law that has been created almost specifically for him. Who are they making this law for in the state of Missouri, if not specifically for Ryan Wingo? And, you know, he's got to make a decision of like, do I take money for these 4 months or not, based on whether I might be committed to or not. And Jason, you're exactly right. That's right. The Arch Manning thing was a charity, right? Now, that doesn't mean that Arch.
The first part, that first little card deal they did, that doesn't mean he didn't get some money. That part we just don't know about.
And the proceeds of that went to charity.
Right. All that went to charity. There could have been some kind of a deal already done, or they're just laying the groundwork for later.
Trust me. Arch Manning could have a Lambo sponsorship this very moment if he snaps his fingers.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Hey, I changed my mind. Don't even tell my dad.
Yeah, right.
Can I get a Lambo?
Yeah, it could happen. It could happen. By the way, if you're just jumping into House Divided, all 2 o'clock hour, we're talking nothing but recruiting. So we got about 10 minutes left or so. So Catch, we've talked about Baker. We talked about Wingo. Another name I jotted down was Dominic McKinley. Is that worth talking about right now? Give me a thought on McKinley.
The deal with Dominic McKinley at this point is that the Longhorns are definitely in the mix. Oklahoma is a big factor there.
And for those that don't know, D tackle out of Louisiana, 6'6", 270. Badass.
Some people have him rated as a 5-star.
Okay.
Rivals not quite as high. Although Rivals got a weird thing with the state of Louisiana this year. It always feels like to me the best players in Louisiana should always be ranked very high. It's kind of on paper, it looks like a weak year in Louisiana, but McKinley's not part of the weak part. He's one of the best players. He's a top 5 to 10 player in the state of Louisiana. I have been told that it's not, I don't think it's as advanced. I don't think Texas is quite as in good a shape as I think they believe they are for Brandon Baker, certainly. Also Ryan Wingo. I think if we're ranking them in terms of the confidence meter, I think Baker's 1. I think Wingo's 2. I think McKinley is 3. And it's hard to peg just how I don't know why I just hung up on my wife. If she calls me back because she's on the road traveling, I will answer the phone on the air and make sure that it's not life or death, because presumably she knows that I'm on the air. Right.
Okay. If you need to duck away, we'll got you.
I answered and hung up on her just then. So if she calls back, we'll do the thing where we take it together. And I hope it's not a bad call. Yeah. McKinley is 3rd in this pecking order of the big timers they're going after. I think Texas is confident that they've got a chance, but I haven't had somebody message me up and go, McKinley, the hay is in the barn, or some version of we got it. Mm-hmm. That hasn't quite happened. I've kind of heard those things about Wingo and Baker.
Okay. Those are a little more certain.
Correct.
Yeah.
I have not put in a future cast for McKinley at all. I have put in future cast for Wingo and Baker to Texas.
All right. So any other I know just a quick clarification question, Catch, and then we can go to any other recruit you want. But just to clarify for me and maybe some of the folks that didn't know it, this D end out of Allen, who's got the last name Omiozulu.
Yeah, he's going to be a Longhorn.
That can't be a coincidence, right? That's the younger brother of the Omiozulu that's already at Texas.
Yes.
Is it Neto's brother?
That is right? Neto's brother.
That's the guy that was. So big brother offensive line, little brother defensive line. I think I have that right.
Yes.
Okay. So for you, that's a guy that you would see definitely trending up towards joining his brother at Texas.
Yeah, and I've got Umeozulu ranked kind of where I've got Blake Ivy ranked. Perfect example. 6'4", 220, kind of a tweener. Not quite. If you look at me when I talk about defensive ends, I've done enough historical research. Chad, in state, so there's 5 stars, there's high 4 stars, there's mid 4 stars, there's low 4 stars. If we talk about the tiers of the 5 and the 4 stars, right? If you take every 5-star and 4-star offensive lineman, in general, over 40% of every defensive end from the state of Texas rated in those tiers get drafted in the NFL.
Wow.
The number of players who end up playing on Sundays is almost at 50%. When we break it down by size, and you start talking about guys who are taller than 6'4" and weigh more than 240, add 20% to those numbers on each side. So when I see a defensive lineman that I like and he's a biggin, I think of the thing that Anwar always tells me that John Gruden told him when he covered the Bucks back in the day in Tampa. John Gruden told him, Anwar, there are only so many 300-pound men who are athletes roaming the earth. When we find them,
right,
they're very valuable. That's how I kind of think about large defensive ends. They may not turn into Von Millers, and they may not turn into like the sexy sack guys. Boy, they play football and make money for a long time, though. And you start getting to the success rates, then we start talking about the things that we were talking about with Denver Harris and Chris Marshall, the wide receiver, where you're talking about 5-star guys. You start talking about the hit rates, and you're like, all of the things that can sidetrack a guy, right? Grades, girls, arrests, drugs, all the things. Injuries. Injuries is obviously one of the big ones. Big defensive linemen, bigger than Umeozulu, they make it at those large of numbers, even when you factor in all of the things that can sidetrack guys. It's crazy.
Interesting. So they may not all become Von Miller, but you kind of need to let them try.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Zena, and he's got like the Von Miller physical profile. Right. And he's not that far. Like Rivals has Umeozulu ranked 32nd in the state. Von Miller, I believe, was ranked 25th in the state by Rivals. Virtually the same. It all almost comes down to kind of that body profile.
Okay. All right. Well, along those lines, Catch, how about this chat? Danny says Solomon, greater than Okoye, greater than Zena should be the correct order of things when it comes to defensive guys. By the way, that's Solomon Williams, the linebacker. That's Okoye, Daniel Okoye, the D end. And then, of course, Omeozulu, who we were just talking about, the D end. Would you agree with that ordering of things?
Yes.
Okay. Solomon, Okoye, then Zena. There you go. Lots of recruiting, because recruiting never dies around here, especially around orangebloods.com. Check out that war room from last night. Again, recruit by recruit, the guys we've talked about today, some of the ones we haven't talked about today, and every bit of the latest information. That's what the War Room's always about on Thursday nights. All the latest information from Catch, Anwar, Sukamel, Dunlap, whoever's got the info, they're going to put it out there for you. And it was really kind of a cool thing to read through. If you're a recruiting freak, you got to have it. orangebloods.com.